3:04 a.m., my lawyer cautioned me with 8 chilling words. "Colin, avoid this action, you'll rue it." In 3 minutes, I delivered a cashier's check worth $174,000 to Gregory Haynes at his penthouse. He greeted me in a silk robe, and my wife stood motionless in his kitchen behind him. That decisive moment led to the loss of my inheritance as well as theirs. For months prior, the situation began subtly, even if I wasn't aware. Haynes started working extended hours, not excessively, just an extra hour here and there or a client dinner over there. She handled social media for small businesses, primarily worked from home, so this change felt off balance. We had been married 6 years. Trust is something one gives willingly. Our apartment was in a mixed-use building in downtown Portland. We resided in the ground floor unit that doubled as her office space during the day. I managed a small importing business from a warehouse elsewhere, yet I regularly returned home for lunch. First noticed the SUV, a black Range Rover, consistently parked in the loading zone for 3 consecutive days, from noon to 2 p.m. Oregon plates, personalized tag HAINES1. Initially, I didn't give it much thought as buildings tend to attract visitors. However, Elise requested that I stop returning home for lunch, citing disruption as the reason. She was engrossed in her laptop and didn't look up when she said this. Her professional video calls were being disturbed by my kitchen activities, she claimed. For 3 years, I had been making sandwiches silently to accommodate this need. My argument about maintaining a professional image fell on deaf ears, so I made adjustments. I started eating at the Thai restaurant nearby, gave her the space she demanded, and the distance between us gradually increased. She stopped inquiring about my day and ceased initiating dinner conversation. When I tried to share amusing stories like a shipping mishap or a peculiar customer, she responded with a polite half-smile one might use with strangers, neither hostile nor angry, just indifferent. 6 weeks into this altered routine, I returned home prematurely due to the flu on a Wednesday. Around 1 p.m., I had been sickening at work and had no choice but to drive back home to rest. Upon entering, I found Elise seated at our kitchen island, sharing wine with Gregory Haynes, who owned our building. We'd met him twice, once for signing documents and another time when our water heater malfunctioned. He was 52, divorced, driving a black Range Rover, and specialized in commercial real estate, transforming old warehouses into fashionable mixed-use complexes. Our property served as his flagship project, and they were enjoying a glass of Pinot Noir, chuckling about something on Elise's laptop. "Colin," Elise exclaimed, momentarily startled but quickly regaining her composure. "You're home." "Flu," I replied weakly, not feeling up to playing detective. "Hello, Gregory," I addressed him. He stood, shook my hand with a firm, assured grip, typical of someone accustomed to ownership. He was merely discussing marketing strategies with Elise. Elise has been assisting me in revamping the digital image of the building. Given her social media consulting background, it was only natural for them to collaborate since he owned the property. Before departing, he suggested Elise send him the mock-ups when ready. Later, Elise admitted they had entered a client-consultant relationship 2 months prior. She was being compensated $2,000 monthly for managing the building's Instagram, Google presence, and tenant newsletter. The income was advantageous as it maintained a good rapport with the landlord and provided a steady stream of income. I subsequently fell asleep, taking NyQuil and sleeping for 14 hours. In retrospect, this should have triggered suspicions, but I was ill and chose to trust my wife. The next red flag emerged from our bank account. Although Elise was capable of managing finances, I preferred handling them due to the organizational aspect. Every Sunday, I reviewed transactions, classified expenses, and updated our budget spreadsheet, a mundane household routine. However, upon inspecting our account, I noticed unusual transactions that raised concerns. In early March, I started noticing unusual expenses: $40 at an unrecognized restaurant, $80 at a winery we'd never visited, followed by larger sums, $300 at Nordstrom, $250 at a downtown boutique, all for professional attire. Elise justified it when I inquired, explaining that Gregory expects me to dress the part for upcoming property management networking events. She revealed 3 such events in the past month, each hosted by genuine organizations with verified websites and LinkedIn pages. Despite my unease about questioning her, the expenditures escalated, with amounts like $500 and $700 consistently spent on work-related clothing. Then there was the Seattle conference, she mentioned on a Thursday in late March, a 2-day social media workshop. Gregory confirmed he would cover the costs, labeling it as professional development. She showed me the conference's legitimate website featuring real speakers and a reputable hotel. She returned on Saturday afternoon. I bid her farewell on Friday morning, urging her to acquire new knowledge. That night, sleep evaded me, not out of suspicion, but insomnia. Around midnight, I rose to brew tea and snatched her iPad from the lounge to peruse news updates. Sharing devices casually, I knew her passcode, she mine. An iMessage notification appeared at 12:47 a.m. Gregory, room 412. Don't knock, I'll leave it ajar. My hands grew cold as I opened messages, scrolling through their conversation thread. Over 2 months of exchanges surfaced, making me physically ill. The messages were not explicit or graphic, but the intimacy was clear, with shared jokes, pet names, reminiscences of last Tuesday and your unique hair gesture, plans to be more cautious after my illness on Wednesday. There was no Seattle conference mentioned. The hotel was genuine. She had personally arranged it. Gregory had transferred $700 to her through Venmo 3 days earlier with the message "Weekend Escape." For 4 hours straight, I stayed on our sofa engrossed in 2 months of text messages unraveling my marriage. Here's what emerged. Their affair began in January, immediately following when she acquired him as a client. The professional relationship served as a disguise. He wasn't compensating her for marketing services. Instead, those Venmo transactions were gifts. The networking events concealed private dinners just for the two of them. Every time I departed for work, every lunch break skipped, they had been in our apartment. Messages disclosed more than just infidelity. They revealed a plot to fraudulently evict me from my home 2 weeks prior. Gregory wrote in a thread that the commercial zoning update would pass in May, and he needed the ground floor space for a coffee shop tenant with a premium rate 5-year lease. Elise responded by questioning about their lease that was valid through August, to which he said he'd handle it, trust him. 5 messages later, Gregory mentioned noise complaints from other tenants, suggesting he had documentation building a pattern leading to an eviction for lease violation. Elise defended him, stating that he wasn't loud and seldom at home. Gregory owned the building and the complaint records, so he planned to evict me first. After moving into the penthouse with him, she would leave me organically. The coffee shop tenant was real, as I found the preliminary lease in another message thread. Gregory stood to gain an additional $4,000 per month by converting our residential unit to commercial, but our lease was the only obstacle. I took screenshots of everything and saved them to 3 separate cloud accounts. To protect my case, I returned her iPad to its original place without altering my behavior in any way. Elise came home glowing on Saturday afternoon, raving about an incredible conference she'd attended. She showed me a photo she'd taken of some PowerPoint presentation, but the generic marketing content could have originated from anywhere. I acted like a husband who believed his wife. The following morning, I contacted a tenant rights attorney named Bate Cordova and explained the situation, the affair, fraudulent eviction plot, screenshots as evidence. She responded with 5 words that changed everything. This is conspiracy to defraud. In Oregon landlord-tenant law, one cannot evict without legitimate cause or fabricate violations. If I could prove Gregory had planned a fraudulent eviction, I could sue for damages, attorney fees, and potentially renew my lease at a below-market rate. However, Bate identified the leverage point. If I was current on rent and not violating my lease, he couldn't touch me, and if I prepaid substantially, I would become essentially untouchable. If he accepted the payment, he would have to refund it to evict me, triggering a different legal process. I had inherited bonds worth about $200,000 from my father 2 years prior, which I kept as emergency savings. Elise knew of this inheritance, but thought it was only around $34,000. Those bonds were liquid, so I decided to cash them in and pay 3 years' rent with a check for $174,000. If Bate Cordova could legally refuse the payment, she asked. I knew she would smile and respond that he couldn't if he had already accepted monthly rent from me. The lease didn't prohibit advance payment, and Oregon law actually encourages it for tenant stability. Over the next 3 weeks, I became invisible, giving Elise complete freedom. During this time, I learned about Gregory's activities from his penthouse above us, which he used every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon when his property manager worked in the building office. I also discovered that Elise had a key to his private elevator. The messages continued carelessly, revealing their mockery of me. By late April, I had gathered all the evidence I needed. screenshots of 2 months of messages showing both fair and fraudulent actions, an affidavit from Bate Cordova documenting the legal issues, a financial report on Gregory's situation, and my father's bonds converted into a cashier's check for $174,000, exactly 36 months of rent at our current rate. I just needed the perfect moment to make my move. It came on May 3rd when Gregory informed Elise that he would file the first noise complaint the following day, marking the beginning of a paper trail leading to eviction proceedings. Knowing they were together, I waited until around 11 p.m. and called Bate Cordova at 11:30 p.m., saying it was happening tonight. I needed her on standby as a witness attorney and to document that the payment was initiated by me, not forced. Bate agreed to be there at 2:45 a.m. At 2:30 a.m., I sent Elise a text, saying I couldn't sleep and was going for a drive. With no response, she was still upstairs. Bate arrived at 2:47 a.m. looking like she had been awakened. I showed her the cashier's check, the pre-drafted advance rent agreement, and the screenshots documenting my reasons for this action. If he declines this payment, she stated, you have basis for a discrimination lawsuit. If he agrees, you're bound for 3 years and his eviction plan crumbles. Regardless, you emerge victorious. Meanwhile, evidence of the affair disclosed following his decision won't let him assert you're coercing him to pay rent. At 3:04 a.m., Bate phoned Gregory's cell phone. He answered on the 5th ring, sounding groggy or affected by something else. Attorney Bate Cordova, representing your tenant Colin Reed from Unit 1B, is delivering advance rent money, according to Oregon landlord-tenant laws. We are currently at your residence and request a transaction. Please come to the door. I heard voices through the phone, a woman's voice named Elise. It's 3 a.m., but Gregory said payments could be tendered whenever the landlord is available. When he didn't respond, Bate suggested they wait since she heard you were accessible. Minutes later, Gregory opened his penthouse door in a silk robe, and Elise stood frozen in one of his shirts in the kitchen. Upon seeing me, her face paled, and Colin said calmly, I am here as a tenant. Bate presented herself as Cordova and asserted that Colin was exercising his rights under Oregon Revised Statute 90.22 by tendering advance rent payment. She showed a cashier's check for $174,000 covering 36 months of rent, and Gregory stared at it like it was a live grenade. Bate confirmed the check's validity from U.S. Bank made out to Haynes Property Management, LLC, stating that Colin is current on rent with no lease violations, offering this payment in good faith. She asked if you would accept the payment. Elise approached them, but Colin suggested discussing it. Bate warned her to step back, stating this was between landlord and tenant. Do you accept the payment, Mr. Haynes? Gregory's gaze shifted between Elise Bate's recording phone, contemplating whether to decline. If he did, it might seem odd why a landlord would turn down 3 years of assured rent, especially if it meant the collapse of his entire eviction plan. He needed to consult with his lawyer first. Bate gave him a 10-second deadline to decide, accept or reject. After this, we'll formally document your rejection in a complaint to the Oregon Bureau of Labor and Utilities regarding discriminatory housing practices. Do you agree? Bates explained, as he was protecting his client's right to housing security, and quite frankly because he could. A pause followed, and Elise wept softly, tears trickling down her face. She understood the implications. Gregory accepted the check with a thanks. Bates then requested his signature on the advance rent agreement, acknowledging receipt of $174,000 for the 36-month period from May 4, 2024 to May 3, 2027. He signed, shaking. Bate handed him a copy, explaining that my client will stay in Unit 1B under current lease terms during this duration. Any eviction attempt without severe lease violation would lead to immediate legal action. She wished him good night before walking toward the elevator. I followed behind her, and as we left, Elise called out my name once, brokenly, disparately. I didn't turn in the elevator. Bates exhaled heavily, stating that this was the most gratifying thing he had ever witnessed after 12 years of practicing tenant law. The next day, I filed for divorce, including in the petition 43 pages of screenshots documenting the affair and conspiracy. I requested fault-based divorce grounds, such as adultery and financial conspiracy. Although Oregon is a no-fault state, evidence of fault impacts property division. Bates had meticulously documented everything, even Gregory's signing of the advance rent check in Elise's presence at 3 a.m. in his penthouse. The divorce lasted 4 months, and I kept the business, my remaining inheritance, and my apartment for the following 3 years at below-market rent. Elise received her car and half our savings, about $8,000. However, the real damage was reputational. Gregory's refinancing plan fell apart. His coffee shop tenant left when they learned of the legal issues with Unit 1B, making it difficult to secure loan terms. He ultimately had to sell the building at a loss 6 months later. The new owner honored my prepaid lease and even offered an extension at the existing rate once the 3 years ended. Elise moved back in with her parents in Eugene, and her social media consulting business suffered due to public trust issues stemming from her affair with her landlord, which was exposed across 43 pages of text messages. As a result, Gregory lost his property management company, and negative rumors about the fraudulent eviction attempt spread throughout the commercial real estate community. I continued living in Unit 1B for the past 18 months. There hasn't been anything serious in my dating life, mainly focusing on work to rebuild parts of my life not founded on lies. Some people question if the money was worth it, if spending my inheritance on rent was an excessive price for revenge. But it wasn't revenge. It was protection. I secured my housing by using legal means, and their conspiracy destroyed itself once exposed. The money bought me 3 years of stability in a city where rents have risen 30%, allowing me to break even compared to market rates. More importantly, it provided evidence that I'm not who Elise thought I was, someone who would simply be pushed around or respond with emotion instead of strategy. At 3:07 a.m. on May 4, 2024, I knocked on that door with a cashier's check and a lawyer. They believed I was weak, thinking I wouldn't see it coming. They were partially right. I didn't anticipate the affair, but once I did, I saw everything. The difference between reacting and responding, between anger and strategy, is that I chose strategy. At 3:07 a.m., strategy manifested as $174,000 in a signed receipt, and they will remember that moment for the rest of their lives. The realization that the weak tenant had just locked them into their own destruction. I sleep peacefully in Unit 1B now. It's quiet and peaceful, and mine for another 1.5 years.